Welcome back, everybody. Hey, how's it going? Everybody having a good Wednesday? Cool. All right. So this was an absolutely stacked show. There wasn't a lot of yapping. There wasn't a lot of backstage talk. It was basically wrestling matches. And it was great. Now, before we get into this, I want to go over notes I took watching Dark last night. Now, I didn't do a Dark video today because, A, they didn't get a lot of views when I did the Elevation one last week. And also, I figured that only one day until this, and, yeah. So I'll just go through this quickly. JDX faced Wardlow. JDX got some offense in early. Didn't matter. 5 power bombs by Wardlow, and, the ref stopped the match. I love superior decisions. It's something you don't see enough of in wrestling. I'd like to see more of it, where a referee just says, that's it, he can't go, he's done. You see it in boxing, where it's a, TKO, and I think wrestling, that should be a thing. Then they had Alley Catch versus Big Swole. Catch with some power, comeback win by Swole. I don't know if she's supposed to be face or heel at this point. I don't know. Then they had Serpentico and Luther versus Santana and Ortiz. Serpentico got beat up. Luther then threw his partner at Ortiz. There was a Three Amigos by Santana. Some nice Eddie chants after that. And Serpentico takes the pin. Luther also did some squealing during the match, so that was interesting. Then you get Dylan McQueen versus Joey Janela. Joey heals it up. Kayla Rossi slams McQueen, and Janela wins. I think Dylan had like maybe 3 moves. Then you get Marina Tucker versus Ty Conte. Vicious Ty kicks. Ty is absolutely fantastic when it comes to facial expressions. And there's more kicks, and then she ended up winning it on the DDT, which is a DDT, her version of it. Then you get Luke Curtis and Cameron Stewart against Lee Johnson and Brock Anderson. The heels isolate Johnson. Johnson would end up winning it. Brock Anderson's... The interesting thing with Anderson is he looks a lot like his dad, but he's not muscular. Like, Arn Anderson was solid. Brock's got some work to do to get there, and maybe genetically he's not going to be in that same realm. He's not going to have that same build that his dad did, but man, Arn Anderson was solid. The next match was Stallion Rogers and Anthony Green versus FTR. And Stallion Rogers and Anthony Green both impressed the heck out of me, especially Anthony Green. FTR, of course, wins it, but there was a hot tag to Green, and he gets a 2 3/4, like almost fall, and it was interesting. Then they had X-Tina K versus the Bunny. The Bunny just controlled the whole thing. It was a pretty easy win. Marcus Cross versus Lance Archer. Marcus Cross with some big hair, only 179 pounds. I think the hair was there to add height as well. And the Murder Hawk. Some nice fringe on those tights for Marcus Cross, and I think he's dead. I think Lance Archer killed him. Ryan Nemeth and Peter Avalon, the wingmen, against John Silver and Alex Reynolds. Silver clotheslined both guys. Nemeth did dances against strutting. It was a weird match. I don't know if there was something just a little off, or if this was just a go take a break kind of match, but it was weird. Then there was a hot tag to Reynolds, and Avalon eats the pin. It's what Peter Avalon does. Daniel Garcia faced Allin Angels, or 5, in Dark Order. Stage dive by Angels on 2.0 and Garcia. Eventually the numbers game works against Angels. And this is where you notice that the Dark Order isn't out to help everybody all the time. So the Dark Order being a little bit against itself is still a storyline here. Garcia would take over. There was a 2 3/4 for Angels. The fans really wanted to see Allin Angels win it. Garcia wins it by submission. The next match was Darian Bankston, Cole Carter, and Sean Maluda versus The Factory. There were QT sucks chants, but QT would get the pin on a diamond cutter, and it wasn't really a close match. Then you get JD Drake versus Colt Cabana. Drake took some control, and then Cabana with the comeback. Pretty good match. Cabana won it, and then the main event was Bear Bronson versus Eddie Kingston. A lot of power by Bronson, and a suicide dive by Bear Bronson. I'm always impressed and terrified when a guy that large does the suicide dive through the ropes. Although I've noticed they don't call it a suicide dive in AEW. The tope suicida, I believe is what they call it. There's some biting back and forth. Then Eddie with some nice chops. He would have been happy with the first match in this show. Bronson then wastes some time. There's some more chops. And Eddie with the back fist wins it. And that was the main event on Dark. So if you missed Dark, there you go. You're all caught up. Now, on to Dynamite. And it was Bryan Danielson versus Kenny Omega to start it. And this was a fight where there were slaps early on, and man, Bryan Danielson's chest was bright red, and you could see the blistering going on. And those are brutal. And I understand, like, wrestling's all the predetermined and all that. Those hurt. There's no way that doesn't hurt. And the knife edge chop that these guys use, that's usually what wrestlers will do when people go, it's fake. Okay. And then they give you that knife edge chop, and those are supposed to hurt like heck. They're not dangerous, but they hurt a lot, right? Danielson worked over Omega's left arm. I thought there was some really good ring work. I thought this was a good veteran match that showed how ring psychology can work. Sometimes you get too caught up in the flippy dives and all that, and there's just one spot to the next to the next. This match didn't really feel like that. Danielson worked Omega over at ringside. And this really was about setting up the label lock, right? More Omega chops, works over Bryan's back, worked over his neck as well. And right away I'm going, this has to be a 5-star match, right? Daniel Bryan chants were going. Fans haven't got the memo that it's Bryan Danielson again, the American Dragon. Roll-ups were traded. So Bryan Danielson bringing over what he learned in WWE, that the surprise roll-up is the most devastating move in all sports entertainment. Though it didn't win a match tonight, so that was nice. So Omega would escape the lock before he got it put on. Omega then slammed Danielson onto the ramps / stage, and that looked like it hurt. So that's the LED ramp that they're walking in on. There's no give to that. And then a V-trigger on the ramp. And honestly, these guys were working pretty stiff tonight. Like, this was, to me, it felt like one of those matches where beforehand these guys go, okay, so we're really gonna exchange some shots here. It's gonna be safe, but somebody could get hurt just with the sheer strength of some of these shots. There was a buckle bomb by Omega that sent Bryan Danielson out. Bryan Danielson, though, with a roll-up for about 2 3/4. Omega, though, gets back in control. A top rope back suplex by Bryan Danielson. That gets him at 2 3/4. It's funny because I know there's wrestling fans that don't like all the almost 3 counts. I love that. And it dates back to 80s wrestling. The almost 3 counts have been something that gets me stoked for wrestling since I was a little kid. AEW chants were going at this point. I heard this is awesome as well. Top rope avalanche dragon suplex by Omega. What? 2 3/4 on that. Then there was a V-trigger. He gets a 2 3/4 on that. And then Bryan Danielson just stomps Omega, just decides if I kick his head off, he's not going to keep going. It's a valid idea. Headless wrestlers don't do very well. Label lock is applied. Omega would squirm out of it. And we end up with a 30-minute draw. This was fantastic. This was exactly what we needed. And then, of course, the Super Click comes in. And they start to beat up Daniel Bryan / Bryan Danielson. So out comes the Jurassic Park crew. And they express it right out of there. And it's a brawl. So to set up Friday's night, right? So it was great. And then after that, they went with a CM Punk promo in the ring because you can't follow it. And he even says, how do you follow that? That's the first thing he said. How do you follow that? Acknowledging there's no wrestling match that can come out after that. We can't. That was great. This is match of the year material right here. Bryan Danielson versus Kenny Omega. This is to sell people on Full Gear when we'll get Bryan Danielson versus Kenny Omega. Act surprised. And then if Omega keeps the strap, I'm calling it now, something happens and Adam Page ends up showing up to set up a rematch there. Fantastic promo by CM Punk. He is absolute gold on the microphone. He sold the match that's coming up on Friday against Hobbs, and it gets you invested in the match. I thought he did a great job. And then Stephen Amell was at ringside, and Punk goes out and gives him a hug on the way by, and so that's kind of weird, right? We've had Rosario Dawson and now Stephen Amell in the same week. And I know Stephen Amell's got a wrestling show and all that, but it's still odd. And yeah, it's an odd thing. Then we get Bryan Pillman Jr. versus MJF. You guys can decide whether or not this makes Bryan Pillman Jr. a bigger star or not. And the first thought I had when I saw Julia Hart coming out with him, I thought, Julia hasn't been at a ringside with him for any of this feud. What's this going to set up? And I'm not sure that it sets anything up. I think it gave them an out where Bryan Pillman Jr. can explain after that this wasn't necessarily that clean of a victory. So Pillman pummeled MJF to start, which makes sense. One thing that's always driven basically your hardcore wrestling fans nuts is when you have this feud, this passionate feud, and then they finally have a match and it starts with a lockup or a test of strength. And it's like, wait, no, these guys are supposed to hate each other. So the fact that Pillman just pummels him off the belt right at the start, great. That's what should happen. He's insulted your father who passed away. He's insulted your entire family and yourself. You should want to punch him in the face, and that's what Pillman did. So that makes more sense than going in for a lockup. Crowd was behind Pillman too. One thing about MJF, this is his hometown crowd. If he's going to get a pop for being at home, this would have been it. Nothing. And honestly, he was playing to the fans for more heat during this match. During commercials, he was playing to the fans too. And he is an absolute heat magnet. And anybody who wrestles against MJF becomes a mega babyface. So if you play this right, even when MJF wins, you have elevated the guy that's against him. That's essentially what should happen. One thing that drives me nuts in wrestling is when we see like a match that might have a clean finish, but it just buries somebody. Where you're like, okay, so now he's not going to be taken seriously after that match. It's a fine line between, somebody winning a match fairly and winning a match fairly, and you still go, yeah, but that was so close. And so that, I think, is the difference. There were 10 head slams into the buckle by Pillman. The crowd counted them all off. MJF then used Julia Hart as a shield. So this is where Julia Hart, being at ringside, comes into it. And then Julia gets in his face, and he grabbed her by the wrist and twisted her wrist and started yelling at her, which opened it up for Pillman to jump out through the ropes and kick MJF and get him away from Julia Hart. But again, nuclear level heat, a good way to do that is for MJF to grab a girl who's 19 years of age and twist her wrist and yell at her for being at ringside and for daring to get in his face. That's going to make the crowd not like him. But eventually, MJF gets it back in the ring, and with the armbar, he makes him tap out. It's a modified armbar. I know that's not what it's called, but it's a modified armbar, and Pillman taps out. So Pillman does not win the match, but he did very well for himself. And again, you can frame this as, if Julia Hart's not at ringside, for him to pull in front of himself outside the ring so Pillman can't do the suicide dive on him, this match could have gone a different way. So do you play that from here, or do you just put Pillman back with Griff Garrison and just Hollywood Blonde, or Varsity Blondes? Hollywood Blondes would be his dad with Steve Austin, which I like. I like that the Varsity Blondes, Hollywood Blonde, I like that it's basically an echo of the generation before. It's great. Then we get to Malachi Black versus Cody Rhodes. And I was discussing this on Twitter, and I understand that a New York crowd is going to cheer for a guy like Malachi Black. But every crowd's cheering for Malachi Black. No matter what he does, the crowds are cheering him. And at some point, the company's going to have to lean into it. Now, there's two ways they can do this. Either you have Malachi Black turn face, or he fights everybody. And my guess is he's going to be a guy who fights everybody. And that can work. You can have him fight the faces and everything, and then when the heels come in the ring, he fights them too. He's like, no, I don't like you either. I am the House of Black. Everybody in this company is my enemy. Everybody. He never has a tag partner. He's on his own, and that's it. I think that could work. Great start to the match. Then they had Brandy Rhodes, who was at ringside for the first time in a while. Now, I understand, too, Cody and Brandy have their show starting up on TNT, or TBS. TNT, I believe. And so she's going to be out there as kind of, it's not a promotion thing, but it kind of is like a way to cross-promote it. So she sat in the ring across from Black and flipped him off, and he laughed, which is great. That's the perfect way to do it. That she gets up in his face and flips him the bird, and he just laughs. Like, oh, that's quaint. That's great. That's can you get out of my ring kind of idea. And it was great. The fans were split on this one at the beginning. Black was in control during the commercial break. Cody gets a foot on the rope at around 2.5. He then works on Black's left knee, and the fans started booing him at this point. So he basically weakened the leg of Malachi Black. See, you'll get those slips like the fans had with the Daniel Bryan chants. They will happen, but they'll happen less regularly the longer these guys are in AEW. So Malachi Black was getting some sympathy cheering from the fans, as well as Cody was kind of working a little bit as a heel here. He was working on the knee. He hit the crossroads. Black kicks out, and the fans went insane. That was one of the loudest chants for a kick out on the night. That was just that cheer, the chant, everything else. It was just fantastic for that. Cody then collided with Arn Anderson. So there's seeds of something here. Cody went out to check on Arn, and Arn's like, I'm fine, get in the ring. Basically, you goober, get in the ring, which was, again, a good way to go with it. And then Cody hits the ref, and I thought he put his hand on the ref, so disqualification, but no. Black spits some mist into the eyes of Cody Rhodes. Well, I don't think he actually hit the eyes. You look after the match, and all the black seemed to hit him from here down, but he sold it like it hit him in the eyes, whether it did or didn't. And the black misted. Cody ends up being pinned for 3. So Malachi Black leaves the ring to a thunderous cheers from the crowd, and Cody was getting booed. So we'll see where it goes from here. You can put Cody back in with the Elite. You can. Again, I think at some point they're going to have to split somebody off from the Elite because that group's going to get too big. But Cody Rhodes, member of the Elite before, and he's worked as a heel before. And I prefer Cody Rhodes as a heel. But again, because of the show, the Go Big show that he co-hosts, I don't know that they pull the trigger on that. So then we get FTR versus Sting and Darby Allin. And Sting's ring entrance is fantastic, and the crowd loves him, and why not? Sting's in control early. He misses a Stinger splash, though. As Dax, I believe it was Cash that was in the corner, and Dax pulls him out of the way. Then we get a hot tag to Darby. Darby flung himself around at FTR. First couple of times it worked, but eventually, he's 170 pounds. Eventually, they're just going to catch him. And they did, and then they started beating him up. FTR controlled it during the commercial. This is what I like. So the abdominal stretch is put on by Cash. And the referee's here, he's here, and while he's got the abdominal stretch locked in, he reaches his hand out, and Dax reaches in, and they hold hands to make the abdominal stretch look a little more painful, and to get the crowd all riled up while the referee is blocked out and can't see it. That is so old school. That is Arn and Tully. That is something Arn and Tully were masters of back in the day. So absolutely great to see FTR using those moves. There was a hot tag then to Sting. He controlled for a minute. One thing that was good about this match too was that FTR was never out of control of this match for very long. FTR, the more experienced tag team, of course. Sting and Darby never having tagged before on TV, I don't believe. And so it makes sense that FTR would be the smarter tag team here. Darby hung himself in the corner. I don't know what happened there. Because I'm watching him and he's kind of on the top, and then he's just kind of, where their foot's kind of tangled around the top rope, and you're thinking, Darby, you could just move your foot. So he's just kind of hanging there so that you have both members of FTR and Sting, so that Sting can get beat up by both guys. But he just kind of hung there upside down, and I thought, just get your feet out. It's not like he's tied to anything. So, Tully then tried to use a chair. And Sting didn't get the chair shot, but he then pushed Cash Wheeler into it. So Tully accidentally chair shotted his own guy, which the referee could absolutely have called for the bell on. But I don't know what you do there. Do you disqualify Sting and Darby when it's Tully holding the chair that put the chair there in the first place? It's a tough call. So, coffin drop then onto Dax on the apron, which looked fantastic and painful all at the same time. Sting then with the Scorpion Deathlock, and he wins it. So, Darby and Sting get the win. Again, this is a match that does not make FTR look weak. They just got outsmarted. Now, one thing I was waiting for after this match, I kept waiting for something else to happen with Pinnacle team members, but it didn't. So maybe this feud is done. But it's interesting to me because since the Inner Circle versus Pinnacle feud stopped, we really haven't seen the Pinnacle come out together. We really haven't seen MJF with them as like a big group. And I like that. I like that it's kind of known that they're a group, but they don't all have to come out together all the time. And they can still, have their own separate identities away from the group. Sometimes when I look back on the NWO stuff in WCW, I think part of the mistake they made was that everybody wore the same t-shirt. Everybody was out there together. They would all run in and interfere in each other's matches, and it all just became this kind of a mob thing. It became this nameless mob. And there really wasn't anything to it. You just watch a match and go, I don't know why I'm watching this, because eventually all the members of the NWO are going to come out and beat these guys up wearing the white t-shirt, or black t-shirts with the white NWO on it. And it kind of takes you out of it. So I haven't seen, while there's a lot of groups in AEW, I haven't seen them making that mistake. So it's nice to see, to be honest. And then we get to the main event, which was Britt Baker versus Ruby Soho. And that can't be easy. So they saved the women's match for the main event. Women's title on the line. And that's the right call. You don't have a title on the line the rest of the night. The title match should be the headliner. So heroes welcome for Ruby. Ruby did very well tonight. I've always been a fan of Ruby. Britt gets a really nice pop too. The other thing with Ruby was WWE did one of those background things on the network where they had I think it was like a whole 1 hour special talking about her becoming Ruby Riott and her upbringing and how she got into wrestling and all that. And it was a really good story. And then she just seemed to get buried on TV. And I thought, you put together these really good backstage things. Fans watch this and they kind of root for the wrestler. Maybe, I don't know, have them win some matches. But, yeah, dueling chants then between Ruby, Soho, DMD. Ruby, Soho, DMD. Great back and forth. Absolutely fantastic. Ruby showing a lot of speed in there. And then Ruby takes out both Jamie Hayter and Rebel, who are at ringside. Referee never made them leave, and I'm surprised. The referees at no point tonight decided, we've had enough of all these people at ringside. Get out of here. Go. Some nights they do. Tonight they didn't do that. So the thing is, while she's taking out Hayter and Rebel, that gives Britt a chance to regroup, and Britt takes over on ringside, or at ringside against Ruby. And she controlled during the commercial as well. As soon as it came back from commercial, Ruby reverses the momentum. And then she hits some kicks after things turn around. Ruby blocks her way out of the lockjaw as well. Britt then gloves up not too long after that, though. So once the glove goes on, she's going for the lockjaw. Ruby gets 2 3/4 after hitting a senton on her. And then Britt gets a 2 3/4 after she hit this amazing move off the second rope. It hit right, so Ruby lands on her shoulders, but if that hits wrong, would have landed on her head. And then 2 3/4 after a stomp as well. Then the interference starts. So you get Rebel up on the apron. Again, the referee never goes, both you ladies need to go. So Rebel gets up on the apron. Well, Rebel, bless her heart, she's just there to get kicked around, so that's what happens. But then Hayter gets up on the apron, so while the referee is dealing with Rebel, Hayter guillotines Ruby on the top rope. I believe it was guillotine on the top rope. And then Ruby ends up in the lockjaw and is forced to tap out. And Britt Baker holds on to the title. So it does not close out this feud at all. It's a nice one to whet your appetite for more between Britt and Ruby. I thought they did really well. I thought, considering how high the bar was with these matches and the pay-per-view quality of tonight's show, I thought they did quite well. So I'm looking forward to night 2, which will be on Friday. Once again, because I'm in Canada, I have to watch it online. They do not have it on TV. I even double-checked on TSN schedule. They don't have it on TV. I am bewildered as to why Rampage does not have a television appearance. It's just on their online streaming service. So with a 2-hour show, I'll be reviewing that one as well. But hey, let me know your thoughts if you watched this one tonight. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.